Hi, everyone. Eric Miller here, Director of Communications at Farmfolio, joined by Oscar Baracaldo, our CEO, for the next episode of the Farmfolio vlog. We've been getting a lot of feedback about the vlog these last couple of weeks. People are very grateful to have this sort of insider perspective on sort of how we see goings on in the global landscape. So happy to continue that here. And today we wanted to talk about something that we've been talking a lot about internally, and that we've gotten a lot of feedback on as well, a lot of questions about climate change, about how we perceive the situation with climate change, how it's affecting our lines of business currently, and how it's sort of reshaping growing regions and growing conditions for the product categories that we operate in. So I wanted just to give a little bit of context about this. You know, people are talking about, and people have seen, the droughts and the increased frequency of severe weather events like hurricanes, freezes, flooding in citrus-producing regions primarily, but also in just across, you know, where tropical fruits are produced. And so I guess my first question is, how is that impacting us at a market level and at a production level as well? Maybe you could speak to that.
Sure, absolutely. I think we can talk for a good length about this, and we've seen news of what's going on in California. Severe drought, then heavy rains, and it's that inconsistency that can make food production quite inconsistent. You pair that with increased costs in fertilizers, post-pandemic, and of course with the occurrence of the Russian-Ukrainian war, which I think worsened things. And I think we're on the verge of seeing some difficulty of food production across the world. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we're in it. You're seeing what's occurring in several regions, and you have to be concerned, right? I think food quality is going to be decreasing, food production is going to be decreasing because of those factors, and that's why origin diversification comes in place in order to increase food security for major economies like the U.S., Europe, and the world over. Even China. Now looking into origins as well in their sector of the world because of climate change as well, given their population. So I think it's a matter of concern, and I think there needs to be a factor of hedging and diversification when we're looking at farmland. So I think we're going to be seeing more of that in years to come. I think that's a trend that's occurring. It's not so much of that we're just going to see a severe drought that's going to be lasting for 30 years, but it's really the inconsistencies and the harsh conditions that farmers are having to face really in different sectors of the world.
Sure, and even on a regional level, what we've seen you mentioned California, that's had a hard time with the availability of water, but also Mexico has been going through a pretty severe drought these last few months. I read some information from the Mexican government saying that around 40% of the country's total land area was listed as in severe drought circumstances as of, that was a little while ago, that was mid to late July. I think that the situation has become a little bit less severe, but it really affected the quality and the consistency of their production in terms of citrus. You have Michoacan and Jalisco that are two of the major
you have
regions, but I'm sure you can speak more to that.
Yeah, we have the Yucatan Peninsula, you've got Veracruz, which is a big food producer. But I think when you're looking at a country like Mexico, you're probably talking about places like Veracruz, some drier areas that of course are going to be affected by a potential drought, which has been what's been occurring this year. And I think that's quite correlated also with what's going on in Australia, as well as in Spain, where you've been seeing all over the news what's going on with droughts, people being concerned about the amount of production. And I think that's why even within those countries and other countries in the vicinity, you're looking for people to trying to diversify away from those drier areas to be able to capture more moist and more water.
Sure.
Essentially, I think countries that have those issues nowadays, water rights are very complex, and you have very few people or very few associations controlling those rights for water. So, it's something that at least at Farmfolio we've always been looking into. How do those water rights work, and of course, when there's less water, you have those drier areas. Those water permits are going to be far in between and going to be controlled by very few people.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and it sort of comes back to the essential question of why Colombia, because like you said, a lot of suppliers and vendors and retailers are going to be looking to hedge their sourcing programs, against these changes in order to secure the consistency of their supply. I mean, what we saw with Walmart, which we'll get into in later episodes, our relationship with Walmart, but they are, the world's largest retailer, trying to shore up their citrus program by coming to Colombia. Colombia, number 2, I believe, in terms of precipitation per land area in the world.
Definitely the top, yeah.
And so, in terms of the availability of water, that's really not an issue that we're going to have here. And also in terms of severe weather events, we don't have hurricanes, we don't have freezes, and so it's going to be interesting to see how companies and how global trade responds to that in the agricultural sector in terms of international, relationships. But I think that Colombia is in a good place. I mean, we've talked a lot about its productive capacity and its sort of future as this agricultural supplier of this new sort of paradigm. But I would be interested to know, how you see climate change playing out in Colombia specifically. I mean, we talked about, Mexico, Spain, Australia, these droughts and things. What are we seeing here at a regional level that could affect agricultural production and our lines of business?
Sure, of course. And just kind of pulling it back to the conversations you were talking about market, and I'll cover that in a second. But essentially, with Colombia, I think you still see some of those winds of the change in the weather, but they're not as severe, right? I mean, we're not impacted by hurricanes, which is ultimately, to me, something like that is just an ender when it comes to an asset like agriculture, right? Because once you start losing trees, or you start losing entire pieces of farm, which is something that occurs in Florida, occurs in Mexico, for instance, or in Southeast Asia, if we want to go a little further out. That's something that doesn't occur here. We don't have impacts from hurricanes coming into the country. Sure, we have affectation coming from storms that are occurring further north that release amounts of water that sometimes can be inconvenient, but we don't have that severe acid ender event like a huge storm or a hurricane. So I think from that point of view, we're well hedged from the economy level, and that's one of the reasons why we came here. We knew that we didn't have that severe weather problem, and the Andes cluster provides several different altitudes. But talking about our business, I can't talk about all farming from Colombia. Of course, we're very well hedged. Colombia has got incredible soil and great weather, but at least from our own thesis, citrus wise and coconut wise, I can tell you with citrus, we have a hard deck of it's around 2,800 feet above sea level that we don't cross that line below at all because of water, right? Because if you go below that water in an environment like Colombia, you could potentially start requiring some hydration for the plants, right? It's something that we've been trying to stay away from. We want to be able to boast mostly from rainwater and staying above that level. Obviously, there's also a cap, right? We don't get past, say, around 3,500, 3,800 feet above sea level. And that's kind of our sweet spot for citrus, right? And with coconut, obviously, we're staying at sea level max, we're talking around maybe 400, 500 feet above sea level. That's where we're at. And that's all part of that weather mitigation, right? But water is very important. We have water rights in all the farms that we work with, and that's part of that strong evaluation and the diligence that we do on all farmland, right? It's not only the soil, it's not only the trees, it's not only the weather conditions, but also those permits and access to that water that we have across the Andes that has allowed us to do this. And of course, I mean, we're going to have years that are going to be difficult, although we have great weather, we're going to have years that are going to be pretty much more wet or more rainy than others that are not the common weather pattern that we've seen in a country like Colombia, but that can be detrimental. I mean, it's tougher to work with there's too much rain. I mean, rain is good, when too much rain can be detrimental to the crop. It's more about the activities. If it's raining too much, you're not able to go ahead and fertilize all the time. You kind of have to wait till it stops raining and come in and out of the crop. So it is challenging, but from a hedging perspective, that's what we hear, right? And agriculture is not linear. I mean, you can see on average good returns throughout a period of time, but you're going to have years that are going to be a little bit different, right? But I think our odds here in Colombia are greater than probably anywhere else that we've seen across our region, at least, to be able to provide and ultimately brings more of that consistency into the production, right? Because we're able to produce throughout the different altitudes and different weather patterns throughout the entire year. And that's exactly what big retailers like Walmart, like you were mentioning, are looking for. I mean, ultimately, no P&L likes the oscillation of prices, right, or volumes, which is what happens with crops and when you're having these severe weather conditions, right? And ultimately, it is those retailers that are looking to be able to hedge themselves and hedge their P&Ls by having more consistency throughout the year. And that's completely understandable. That's exactly what we want as well.
Yeah. Well, Walmart has built its entire business around everyday low prices, and to be able to do that, they have to have the consistency of supply, and I think that's what Colombia represents for them. But that's something I think we can get into at a later date. I mean, I know we've had a lot of great conversations with them and expanding that relationship, but I want to leave it there. I'm glad to be able to provide a little bit of insight on the climate piece, something that people are definitely interested in. And I mean, as I'm sure our viewers can see behind us, the climate here is very agreeable, would be a good word.
Absolutely.
And the ability to provide that year-round production is a big advantage for us. So I want to leave it there. I hope everyone has found this interesting, gained a little bit of insight into how climate change is affecting global tropical fruit markets. Obviously, it's a big topic, and our intention is not to give a comprehensive analysis here, but I hope everyone has found this informative and enjoyed this episode, and we will catch you next time.